Mercy of the Lord from everlasting to everlasting. Mercy of the Lord. Mercy of the Lord. From everlasting to everlasting. The mercy of the Lord. From everlasting to everlasting. The mercy of the Lord. From everlasting to everlasting. The mercy of the Lord. Stars the east is from the west. The mercy of the Lord. Skies the heavens above our heads. Let it go. God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. And if the stars were made to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. And if creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath.
Hey, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, so we just wanted to give a reminder that there are packets for everybody. If you didn't get one on your way in, they're being handed out at the doors. We also have refreshments, so if you want a cup of coffee or a cookie, feel free to make your way on out, hang a left outside the doors, grab some and come back in. But we'll get started in like 2 or 3 minutes, so just a quick heads up.
Chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Well, you lost your life so I could find it here. And if you left the grave behind you so alive, I can see your heart and everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart and feel you a different way. Every precious one, a child you died to save. And if you gave your life to love them so alive, like you would again 100 billion times, but what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
All right. Well, hey, good evening. If you're out in the atrium, make your way on in. We're excited to get our Parent Life Night kicked off. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Dominic Mass. I serve on staff here at Silver Creek Church. I oversee our student ministry, so I get to work with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And tonight, we're really, really excited to partner with you as parents because we know that it's hard to be a parent. And tonight is really focused on what does it look like, what does it mean for us to parent well in a challenging world. And so we have a really great evening planned for you, and we hope that you're able to walk out of tonight encouraged and equipped. And so what we've kind of planned for our evening is to hear from 3 speakers and to have kind of 3 presentations that almost feel like a TED Talk style. So each presentation will be about 15 to 20 minutes. We have some of the following being talked about: Parenting Resilient Kids by Aurora Superintendent Mike Roberta. We have Parenting in an Online World by Harmon Principal Mark Abramovich. And then our last speaker, Pastor Todd Iannetta, will be talking about what does it mean to trust God with your parenting. And we know that in 15 to 20 minutes, we can't go super in depth with some of these conversations, but we hope to at least start the conversation tonight. And we hope that through what's presented, you might be encouraged and equipped. Now, at the end of these 3 presentations, we will be having a Q&A. And so I want to encourage you, as you're hearing some of these presentations, go ahead, feel free to write down your questions. There's actually a note card in your packet. So if you look in your green packets, there's a note card that you could write down some questions while you hear these presentations. And then when we get to the Q&A portion of the evening, you can go ahead and just raise your index card, and we'll have people walking around who can gather those and bring them on up. Or you could even text us. So you can text the word Silver Creek to that phone number. And then after you get like a welcome message from us, feel free to text in any questions that you might have throughout this entire night. So I'd encourage you, as you're listening to our speakers and the topics that they're presenting, feel free to please write down some questions and have those ready so that when we get to the Q&A portion, we can have that discussion. So guys, we're really excited to be together. We hope that you are blessed by tonight. And I just kind of want to open up our evening with a prayer, asking God to really kind of open up our ears and our minds to some of the stuff that's going to be talked about tonight. So if you would, bow your heads with me and I'll pray for us. God, thanks for the chance to gather, to talk about parenting. And we know that this is important because you call yourself a father. And so, God, we look to you tonight. We really want to be equipped, and we want to be encouraged because we know it's hard to lead the next generation well. And so, Lord, we pray that you would help us figure out how to lead through challenges, how to lead through difficulties. I pray that you would encourage the parents in the room tonight. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, would you help welcome with me Aurora Superintendent Mike Roberto. Come on up.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here to Silver Creek. As mentioned, I'm Mike Roberto. I am the superintendent of the Aurora City Schools. And, when preparing this presentation, Todd and Dom and I tried to figure out what's the best thing that we could talk about and reinforce the partnership between the schools and the family. And we ultimately came up with the idea of touching upon our school's strategic vision with a focus on the competency of resilience. So certainly I don't have any great parenting advice to share with you, but I can talk about what we've done and are doing it in our schools so that you as parents will be able to maybe connect to some of these things from home and see what you can do to help your child to grow to be more resilient. So starting with our strategic vision, earlier I mentioned our strategic vision, so that's probably the best place to start. The strategic vision can be found on our district website if you're ever interested. And I suspect the first thing that you will notice is the mantra, Aurora Learners Future Ready. Now, this is the why statement or the purpose of our strategic vision. This document also contains a section titled A Vision for Our Future, which emphasizes our focus or our goal of preparing young people to be successful learners in an ever-changing world, which again boils down to Aurora Learners Future Ready. Now, the definition of learner can mean different things to different people. So we wanted to be clear in our strategic vision that the term learner for the Aurora City School Districts carries with it some key characteristics, including the importance of continual growth. So learning then is a process, not a product. And learning through the lens of this vision is less about gaining knowledge through curriculum transfer and more about being able to build on that knowledge and apply it so a young person is prepared for life. Now, the developing learners is the main focus of our strategic vision. We are also targeting 6 competencies to nurture in young people who attend the Aurora City Schools. And these 6 competencies are what our stakeholders in our community have stated are important for young people to develop in grades pre-K through 12. And I suspect you as parents recognize the importance for your children to be critical thinkers and collaborative, or to think innovatively, yet still have a balance between empathy and resilience, and especially when things start to get hard. So, however, I think it is important to emphasize that these competencies are not being taught in the Aurora City Schools, but instead we're intentionally putting young people in situations in grades pre-K through 12 to help develop or nurture these competencies. So focusing on the competency of resilience for just a moment, we recognize that being able to persevere through adversity is a valuable skill for young people to learn and to possess. That's why in the classroom, we work to put young people in situations to struggle, but with support. And we know the brain develops according to how it's used, and therefore learning environments should promote active reflection and productive struggle by giving young people meaningful practice in iterating through failure. even at the cost of efficiency. And resilience can help young people to adapt to change, cope with setbacks, and develop the skills to bounce back from difficult situations. It also helps them to build self-confidence and stay motivated, and develop problem-solving skills which lead to a growth mindset and ultimately independence. And it's this idea of a growth mindset that I wanted to dig deeper into, as we believe it's an important ingredient for nurturing resilience in young people. Now, growth mindset was most famously championed by psychologist Carol Dweck in her book titled Mindset. Several years ago, the Aurora City School District staff read Dweck's book, which explains the power of a growth mindset over that of a fixed mindset. Now, in general, a young person with a fixed mindset tends to set limits for themselves based on their ability. They miss choice opportunities for improvement, consistently underperform, and when things start to get hard, they're quick to give up. On the other hand, those young people with a growth mindset are more resilient and understand when things start to get hard, it's actually a good sign, as their brain is growing because they're learning. Now, of course, no one person has only a fixed mindset or only a growth mindset, but rather they have tendencies one way or the other based on the situation. So our goal of the staff was to be able to see characteristics of the growth or fixed mindset in their students, and then support and encourage the staff to help students develop more of a growth mindset approach. Now, to help develop strategies to support this growth mindset, we followed up reading Mindset with a book by Shawn Achor titled The Happiness Advantage. And it's a book that I highly recommend. Now, where Dweck's mindset establishes differences between a growth and a fixed mindset, Achor's Happiness Advantage helps one make that shift from a fixed mindset to that of a growth mindset. Now, to be clear, the Happiness Advantage isn't like, that song, Don't Worry, Be Happy, or Seeing the World Through Rose-Colored Glasses. It is instead, though, based on research of positive psychology. So as an example, most people follow the formula that if you work hard, you will become successful. And once you become successful, well, then you'll be happy. The only problem with this formula is it's broken. And it's broken because it's backwards. Decades of research have proven in no uncertain terms that the relationship between success and happiness works the other way around. Happiness is actually a precursor to success. And optimism they fuel performance and achievement, giving us that competitive edge that Achor calls the happiness advantage. So cultivating our nurturing positive brains makes us more motivated, efficient, and resilient, and productive, which drives our performance upward. Now, this research produced 7 specific, actionable, and proven patterns that predict success and achievement, which are the 7 principles of the happiness advantage. Now, the first of which is called the happiness advantage because most positive brains have a biological advantage over brains that are neutral or negative. This principle teaches us how to retrain our brains to capitalize on the positivity and improve our productivity and performance. As an example, we all know that the negative emotions such as fear or anger can lead to either fight or fight responses due to high levels of the hormone cortisol in the brain. And this is caused by stress. However, positive emotions flood the brain with 2 different chemicals, serotonin and dopamine, which not only make us feel good, but they dial up the learning center of our brains to higher levels, which broaden the amount of possibilities we process and making us more thoughtful, creative, and open to new ideas. So the second principle, called the fulcrum and the lever, plays off how we experience the world and our ability to succeed within it. And this is all about mindset. This principle teaches us how we can adjust our mindset, the fulcrum, in a way that gives us the power or the lever to be more successful. And the more we utilize a growth mindset, as depicted in this diagram, by having that fulcrum move more to the right, the longer the lever, and therefore more power or leverage we have. Now, the classroom application to this principle can be boiled down to expectations. What we expect from young people and from ourselves manifests itself in the words we use, and these words can have a powerful impact and end result. Now, this is important for teachers and parents to understand because the belief that teachers have in a student's potential can unwittingly and non-verbally be communicated, both good or bad. So more importantly, these nonverbal messages can be digested by students and transformed into reality. It's a phenomenon called the Pygmalion effect. because the belief in another person's potential brings that potential to life. Now, the third principle, called the Tetris effect, it's all about seeing patterns. Our brains are designed to see patterns, and we take advantage of this in the classroom, such as in math, language arts, or in music. Helping young people to see these patterns allows them to make their own connections to the content. And out of the classroom, I suspect you have experienced the Tetris effect yourself. As an example, when you buy or you're looking for a car, it's not uncommon to all of a sudden start to see many cars on the road with the same make or model or even color. Of course, those cars were always there, but you are just starting to pay more attention because you are looking for patterns. Our brain is always looking for patterns, and the process our brain is always looking for patterns, and in the process, actually are filtering out most of what we take in. Scientists estimate that we remember 1 of every 100 pieces of information we receive. So looking for patterns has served us well over the years. Now think about our ancestors, who were able to be looking for patterns of danger and were therefore are able to avoid being eaten by a lion or a tiger. This is an example of negative Tetris effect, as the individual is looking for and therefore sees negative patterns around them. Well, there's also the positive Tetris effect, where one can train our brain to scan the world for opportunities and ideas that allow our success rate to grow. And when our brains constantly scan for focus and look for positive patterns, we profit from these 3 of the most important tools available to us: happiness, gratitude, and optimism. Now, the value of using these tools is illustrated in the story of a shoe company in the 1900s that sent 2 salesmen to Africa to determine the market potential for their products. One salesman was sent to the east coast of Africa, while the other salesman was sent to the west coast of Africa. Both of the salesmen completed a basic survey of the target market and then called back to the office. The salesman that was sent to the east coast of Africa reported, "No one here wears any shoes. There's no market for us here." The other salesman sent a message, "No one here wears any shoes. There's a huge market for us here. Send inventory fast." And then the difference between people who capitalize on the chances and those who watch them pass by or miss them entirely is all a matter of focus. When your brain looks for positive patterns, it stays open to the possibilities. So the key then is not to completely shut out all the bad all the time, but to have reasonable, realistic, and healthy set of optimism. The ideal mindset isn't heedless of risk, but it does give priority to the good. So, following up, the principle of following up is all about learning from our mistakes. As educators and as parents, we want our kids to learn from their mistakes. But if we never allow them to be in situations where they're allowed to make mistakes, we limit their opportunities for learning. So in the classroom, this could show up by not having high expectations, or not putting young people in situations to go through productive struggle during a lesson. At home, this could be characterized by the helicopter parent or the snowplow parent who hovers over your child to keep them from experiencing failure, or eliminates all barriers so they have an easy road to follow. Now, none of these help young people because they have to be able to learn how to fall up. And we want them to learn to do this while they're working with a net of support at both home and at school. So one way this can be done is by utilizing something called the R factor. Now, in this equation, E plus R equals O, the E represents an event that takes place which is out of our control. The O represents an outcome we want to happen after this event. And the R represents our response to that particular event. Now, the only thing we are in control of is that R factor, or our response. If we want a certain outcome, we have to respond to the event accordingly. This is the technique that we all can learn. The human psyche is so much more resilient than we realize. We have to remember and help our kids understand that the success is not about never falling down or even falling down and getting back up. It's about using that downward momentum to propel ourselves in the opposite direction and therefore learning to fall up. Now, the fifth principle is basically how limiting the focus to small, manageable goals can expand the sphere of power. And one of our biggest drivers of success is the belief that our behavior matters, and that we have control over our future. And this is why in the classrooms, we try to empower young people by providing what we call voice and choice. Meaning, when able, we give young people the opportunity to select what and how they go about their learning. Feeling that we are in control is one of the strongest drivers of both well-being and performance. Interestingly, psychologists have found that these kinds of gains in performance and happiness have less to do with how much control we actually have and more with how much control we think we have. Zero Circle plays off this idea that you first need to control your own small circle of influence, meaning yourself, and that begins with self-awareness. Now, those young people who learn how to identify how they're feeling and how they can put their feelings into words are the quickest to recover from adversity, or said another way, tend to be more resilient. So this is why our earliest learners in kindergarten begin to learn about the zones of regulations. We're teaching students in our district how to consciously regulate their actions, which in turn leads to increased emotional control and problem-solving skills. Through the use of the zones of regulation, our students are learning how to recognize when they are in different states or zones, and then use strategies to change or stay in a zone. If young people are angry, they are considered to be in the red zone. Sad or tired, in the blue zone. Ready to learn means they're in the green zone. They also learn that throughout their day, they float between zones, such as at recess, they would be operating within the yellow zone and be excited, but as they come back to class, they move into the green zone and are ready to learn. So at the other end of the spectrum, at the high school, we take advantage by helping young people identify which aspects of a situation they do have control over and which they don't. Once identified, we try to help them chunk the problem and identify one small goal that they know that they can accomplish as a first step. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and small successes can add up to major achievements. So, I think it's safe to say we've all heard of the 5-second rule, but the 20-second rule, which is the sixth principle, well, it doesn't have anything to do with that. But it does, however, have to do with one of my favorite sayings from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And the 20-second rule is about decreasing what is called the activation energy for positive habits and increasing the active energy for negative habits. In this case, the activation energy is defined as the energy needed to start a task. Now, here are two quick non-classroom examples that I wanted to actually start, that I started doing at home to follow the 20-second rule. So to increase the activation energy for my habit of wanting to eat desserts, I collected all of our sweets and I moved them from the kitchen to our mudroom, which is about 15 to 20 steps away from the kitchen. And the idea is that it would take more effort for me to walk the extra steps to the mudroom and therefore increase the activation energy, which would give me a better chance to hold off on eating, so many sweets. Now, on the opposite end, I wanted to start reading more and watching TV less when I got home after work. So I started to leave the book and my reading glasses next to my chair, which is within easy reach, and I strategically kept the remote out of reach. This lowered the activation energy for reading and keeping it under 20 seconds to reach, and increased the activation energy for the TV remote. In classrooms, teachers try to design lessons which set young people up for success by creating and supporting habits or routines in the classroom which support learning, and therefore lower the activation energy, while increasing the activation energy for those that take away from learning and are considered distractions. It's the 20-second rule that helps us and to remind us to do just that. So finally, the last of these principles as applied to the classroom is social investment, which emphasizes that our social support system is our single greatest asset. An empirical study of the well-being of 1,600 Harvard undergrads found this to be clear. Social support was far greater predictor of happiness than any other factor, more than GPA, family income, SAT scores, age, gender, or race. And this makes sense from the brain's perspective as well, because when we make positive social connections, the pleasure-inducing hormone oxytocin is released into our bloodstream, immediately reducing anxiety and improving concentration and focus. So this is why in the Aurora City Schools, we believe learning is social. And when designing learning environments, we're intentional about honoring the social aspect of our humanity. The classroom environment should provide abundant opportunities for collaboration, social engagement, and for young people to freely reflect and challenge the thinking of others and themselves. Simply put, individuals who invest in their social support systems are better equipped to thrive in the most difficult circumstances, which by definition makes them more resilient. So of course, these 7 principles don't work in isolation, but are linked, and using several in concert with another enhances their collective power. It also takes more than just exposing our staff to these principles. We find that the best way to support them is applying these principles for themselves and then into their classroom. However, when these principles are applied to make positive changes in our own life, we are unconsciously shaping the behavior of the incredible number of people. And this includes the young people with whom we all share a common bond, that is to say, your children. So, as mentioned, this is our vision for the schools and something we continue to aspire to. We also understand that there's always room for growth as a district. And I suspect you will find that there are many of our staff who are aligned to this strategic vision. And you might find others that are still working towards it. I hope that this provides a little of an insight of how at the Aurora City Schools are trying to use our strategic vision to nurture the competencies within the vision, which includes helping to develop resilience in our kids. Thank you for your hospitality and kindness this evening. And as always, go Green Men.
Thanks so much, Mr. Roberto. Can we give it up one more time for him? Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Doesn't that make you love Aurora School District even more than you already did? Yeah, I love the vision behind what Aurora's doing, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to invite some administration here, just to kind of give us some angles, what it means to invest in our kids, and the investment that's already happening at school. And I know resilience is a big part of that, helping our kids understand what does it mean to get through even hard things. I feel like that's the double-edged sword of technology. Everything's gotten easier, right? But what happens when we actually do run into a speed bump? And so I hope that was super encouraging to you. Well, hey, before we move to our next speaker, which I'm really excited for, we have a little surprise for you. That's right. We wanted to say thank you for coming out to a Parent Life Night, and so we have hidden tickets like Willy Wonka in your Parent Life packets. And for this round of a prize, I'm only going to ask you to kind of raise your ticket if you have a green piece of paper behind your notes section. If you have a green piece of paper, you can raise that really high. Oh, we have it right here. If you have other colors, hold on to those colors for later this evening. But let's go ahead and see what our green ticket won tonight. That's right, 4 tickets to a Cleveland Guardians game this spring. So find me after the event, and we will get your email. Yeah, give it up. Give it up. So yeah, we've got 4 Cleveland Guardians tickets that we'll hook you up with, and you can take whoever you'd like. A big vision of us as Silver Creek is we want to be building the family. So we hope that even with some of these prizes, we can kind of invest in your own building of the family. Well, let's not take too much time to get to our next speaker, which is Mr. Mark Abramovich. He is the Harmon Middle School principal here in Aurora, and he's going to be talking about what does it look like to parent in an online world. Let's give him a warm welcome.
More importantly, need the glasses on. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dominic, for that nice introduction. And thank you, everybody, for coming in and welcoming me here and allowing me to be here. I've been a part of the Aurora community now going on 20 years, and it just gets better and better every time. The support here is phenomenal. I often use the term typical Aurora. And what I mean by typical Aurora, that means the typical support that is always given. That is outstanding that you guys are here tonight and to be a part of this. When we talk about parenting in an online world, is what I'm going to talk a little bit about. And when I say that, as far as parenting in an online world, we talk a lot about cell phones. And believe me, we're not going to walk out of here and you're going to go, man, Mark really knows everything there is to know about a cell phone. Now I understand it better. That's not what it's all about for that. The other part of that, too, is I'm not going to try to say this. I have 3 kids, all teenagers, just about, and I'm not going to be giving you all this advice, like Mike Roberto said as well, on I got all the answers on how to be a perfect parent. As my wife always says, on January 1st of every year by around noon, I already lost out on my chances of Father of the Year. There's something that I did that she's like, seriously, you really did that? And I'm like, oh, man, I blew that one already. So I usually don't get to noon before I'm out of the running for that. But one of the things that we talk about for being with the parenting in the online world is making sure we all are aware of some of the things that are out there. And when I say that, it's like some of the things are pretty obvious with that. And one of the first things I want to talk about is our cell phones. Everybody in here have a cell phone with them? Think about your cell phone. What do you do with your cell phone every single day? Do you use it for work? Do you use it for communication? Do you use it for games? Do you use it for research? Do you use it everything above and beyond, right? We all use those things for that. Think about this. Our kids have that probably the same cell phone. Many of you guys are probably saying, I have an iPhone 10. My kid's got the 13. How do I always get stuck in that position on that, right? And so, but think about that. Say they have that iPhone 13 or iPhone 12 or iPhone 14. They're going to look at right now that iPhone 12 at home that they have. And you can look at the one right now in your hands. It's a pretty powerful device, isn't it? Think about what you could do with it. They say when we had the iPhone 6 or iPhone 7, that was more powerful than that they had for the moon landing that they took in outer space. The iPhone 12 right now is twice as powerful as the shuttles that they took around the moon multiple times. Like, holy cow, that's a powerful device. But think about that phone right now that you have. That is the worst cell phone that you or your teenage kid will ever have. Think about that again. The phone that they have, how awesome it is, amazing what this thing can do. You could turn on the TV right now at your house. You could control your car, start it up, turn it up. You could do it all. Open your garage door, shut your garage door. It's the worst phone they'll ever have. So if this iPhone 12 right now is doing all these things, what's the iPhone 15 going to do for us? What's the iPhone 20? What's the iPhone 25? Somebody says it's going to be like an implant in the back of your ear or on your hand and just touch it like that and talk. I don't know. But can you imagine that? It's the worst device they'll ever have, and think about how powerful that is. So I want us to always keep that in mind. That's not like some far-fetched idea or some crazy concept, but it is something that when we start thinking about it, you just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. When you take a look at that, what kind of training do we have with our cell phones? I know that my kids, when they rode bikes, oh my gosh, we trained and trained and trained, training wheels coming off. I remember one of my kids, I had to actually get a new pair of training wheels because we wore them out and they're broken. I'm like, they couldn't learn how to ride a bike. I'm like, oh my God, you got the coordination of your mother. And so we're trying, we're training, we're going on and on. My daughter right now, my oldest child is 16 years old. She's starting to drive. The amount of training we put, behind that car, and I think I scared her to all but Jesus because I told her, hey, one of the first things I told her, that car, it's a weapon. You get behind that car, man. There's the damage that you could cause to other things. And she's like, holy cow. She's a small little kid, but we're training on that. One is ironically here in Aurora, you can relate to it, of one of the events or activities that cause the most injury to a kid. You know what it is? What do they do that they get hurt in the most? Football, hockey, wrestling. What do they do? You know what it is? Multiple doctors have told me this. Skateboarding. And why is that? Every kid gets on the skateboards and they take off. They go to the skate park over there. They're doing flips. I've coached so many baseball teams, and some of your kids have been on my teams. We're at those parks over there, and I'm like, oh, my God, the kids at the wrecks that go on and happen over there. Because I don't see the training that takes place with those skateboards. You get a new skateboard, and boom, off they go. When we get that cell phone in our hands, we hand it to our kids and say, here you go. Here's a cell phone. A few years ago, we had a person come into Aurora Schools. Her name was Jessie Weinberger. And Jessie Weinberger, she wrote a book, and she is phenomenal. If you have a chance, look her up, and she continues to produce new things. But she wrote a book that says The Boogeyman Exists. and he's in your child's back pocket. And so the Aurora City Schools Foundation, who does so much for the schools, fundraising to provide other things for the schools, brought Jessie in, spent thousands of dollars, great money, well worth the time. She was amazing. But that book that I have of hers, read it cover to cover and referenced it multiple times, 4 or 5 years ago, it's like, oof, that book's obsolete now. There's so many things in it she mentions that we laugh at. We're like, oh, the kids don't even talk about those things anymore. But it's important that we understand that, okay, I'm not the most tech-savvy individual, but we have to be able to adapt with it. One of the things, and Mike Roberto talked about it as well, is our 6 competencies. Our 6 competencies that we have with the Aurora City Schools, and I'm going to talk about them now with our cell phones, is that when we talk about, at Harmon Middle School, I talk about all the time, and for those who don't know, the saying at Harmon Middle School is do the right thing. And the ultimate thing, like I always tell kids, of do the right thing is do the right thing when nobody's watching. I tell my players that. Hey, I tell them to go home, make sure you're practicing your pitching, make sure you're practicing your hitting, make sure you're shooting that ball the correct way, make sure you're working on your tackles at home. And they're, yeah, coach, I did that. I taught English for many years, and I'd tell them, parents would always ask me, what do we need to do to help my kid learn more, understand more, comprehend more, blah, 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 blah. And I'd always say 2 answers on that. Read more. So I'd ask my students the next day, did you guys read last night? Oh, yeah, Mr. A, we read last night. Yeah, I hope they did. Because when nobody's watching, you know whether you read last night. Well, think about a cell phone. That cell phone, they grab that cell phone, nobody's watching. Right? That powerful device. What are they doing when nobody's watching it? Oh, they're on the cell phone. What we have to do as parents is we have to be not an influence for them. We have to be the influence to our kids. We have to make sure we are the influence for them. Do you ever have your kids, you look over, they're on the cell phone in another room, or they're over there making dinner or something, I look over, my kid's on the cell phone, and all of a sudden he comes up to me and says, Dad, you know what I love? I would love to have some Taco Bell. What? Where did that come from? Next thing you know, later on that night, my daughter comes running down the steps. I'm thinking, holy cow, she probably saw a spider up there. What's wrong? She goes, Dad, you know where we haven't been in a while? We haven't been to Pulp. I really would love to go to Pulp again. I'm like, where did this come from? Well, what about that power of suggestion, right? All the time. They're on that cell phone. All these ads are popping up. Constant things coming across. That's the influence. How do we become that influence is what we need to do. So many times when we have that and we think about our kids, who in here with teenage kids at any point, whether you have them now or before, have you ever looked at that kid and said, what were you thinking, right? I know, or do you look at them and go, who are you? Wait, are you my kid? Let me see some ID. Are you really? Did you just? And we have to understand that when they are on that phone, there's all these influences that are taking place. And we're going to talk more about this. But we talk about them being influenced by so many other things. They're being influenced about not just what they see on this or what they're supposed to do, but all these things about body image, body shaming. We'll mention before, as far as other things that they can do or get into. All these different things that they're being influenced with. And so with social media and their peers are telling them, watch this, look at this. They send it to each other nonstop. And that influence is always there. Have we ever then gone into screen time? Last week was crazy work week for me, a lot of time up there, and we did this and that. And I got a message yesterday or today on my phone that says, screen time down 25%. I was like, hey, way to go. Screen time's down. But do we ever do that with our kids? Do we check on that screen time with them? Can you imagine our kids, it's not unrealistic to think that our kids are on a cell phone 3 hours a day, right? And that might be kind. Some of you guys are like, oh my God, I wish my kid was only on for 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day after 1 week, do you realize that's a whole day? 24 hours. 24 hours in your day, and 24 hours in a week. One whole day has been taken and consumed by that cell phone. Not by you, not by those that are providing, not by those that love them, but they're taken by that cell phone on that. And so what we have to understand then, when they're taking that much time, The mental approach that those kids are getting now is a different animal. Think about if we had them for an entire day, 3 hours a day. Imagine them listening to you for over 3 hours a day. Wow. Yeah, some of you guys are like, my kid can't listen to me for more than 3 seconds. And imagine then if they're what that influence is going to be. So we have to think about, are they being influenced on what to wear, what to eat, how to look, how to talk, how to think? We all can control that. So one of the things, if you could go back to that other screen up there, when we talk about our 6 competencies here, one of our first competency looking at is being innovative. You guys, we need to be innovative as parents as far as the cell phone. Now let me go back and let me understand this. So I talked to you all the things about the cell phone, but I want to make it clear when I say this. I'm not saying the cell phone is Satan or the bane of all our existence. That cell phone, that powerful device they have in their hands, that thing is awesome. This thing is great. And so we have to, though, use that to our advantage. Have we talked about being innovative with our cell phone, with our kids? How does a cell phone, have you asked them, make you better as a kid? How does it make you better as a student? How does it make you think in a different way, being innovative? Have them show you. You know, one of the things that they have on their phones, we all know, we have it on our phones. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of apps out there, right? You could get an app to do anything. One of the things that we do in the Aurora City School District in our English department, we work with and through the Readers Writers Workshop model. I'm not going to get into that, but in a nutshell is we want you guys to be able to read. We want our kids to be able to read, and read some more. Me as an ex-English teacher would think about, oh no, I have to make sure I know what every kid is reading. Oh man, I wish I can go back and do that again. I would be so much better. But now you sit down, so what we train our teachers to do is be able to sit and talk to a kid about a book that they are reading. The teacher may have not read it, right? There's millions of books out there. Talk to your kids about those apps. Go through that phone. Show me, what is this one here? What does that one do? What does that app do? And you know what? Compliment them on so many of the things that they have, because I guarantee there's a ton of things on there that they are very innovatively have put on there and use in a productive manner. Have they ever been complimented about that on their phone? Most of the time we just sit there and say, you're still on that phone, get off that phone. What? You're doing what? Well, you're looking at what? I bet they have a lot of good things on there that they should be praised about. Have your kid create a cell phone contract. See, here's the thing. We all signed, right? When we got our cell phones, we signed a contract. Remember those contracts we signed in stores or whatever? Because if I'm not mistaken, I feel pretty confident in saying you guys are in charge of that cell phone. You guys signed the contract. I know I did with my kids. I pay for that cell phone. If you guys have your kids pay for it, God bless you. That's great. I want to figure out how you did that. But that's great. But you know what? Do they have a contract on it? Let them have some stake in the game of how I'm going to use it, what I'm going to report out to you on. Be innovative of how we use that cell phone. We take a look at collaboration. Do we ever collaborate with our kids about our cell phones? Do they understand the cost of our cell phones? Do they understand how to use that? Not only if it breaks, because how many times now I see it, phone breaks, oh well, guess I got to get another one. I've seen kids flat out smash them purposely. You know why? Because they only have an iPhone 9. Everyone else had the iPhone 11. Oh, yeah? Mine broke. Do they understand what that just did to you guys? But I'm not saying in a mean way about it. Collaborate with them about that. Understand, here's the bill that I get every single month for our family cell phones. Well, Dad, I thought you already paid for that. Oh, yeah, I paid for that. Now what we have to do every month. But that's good to have that collaboration, because you know what? That's stake in the game of how to take care of it, how to use it, how to appreciate it. Next, talking about how to manage its use. There's so many ways to manage the use of a cell phone. That should be collaborated together with your students, with your kids on that. Have you guys ever talked to your kids about answering the phone when they call it? Have you ever had a conversation with them and said, I call you all the time, you never answer. I text you, you don't respond back. Well, that should be a conversation that we collaborate with, and let's go back to that contract. That cell phone is going to continue to be in your hands, that when I call, you answer it. All right? And we're all on the same, but again, this is a collaboration that we're working together on. I go back on the same way. My kids call me. I answer it. I go to it. And if I'm in the middle of something I can't, I let them know, hey, can I call you in a minute? And I know then if they call me again or respond, no, Dad, I need to talk to you now. Or my wife says, I need to talk to you now. Okay, this is a big deal. So let's get out of what we think is doing is important, but I want to make sure we're all in that collaboration with our family. Have you guys ever had your kids substitute a phone for their conversation? You need to have that collaboration with that. What do I mean by that? You guys are in the kitchen. Come down for dinner. Or they text you and say, hey, what's for dinner? You text them, did you do your homework? Don't substitute that phone for that. You might be as guilty as anybody on that. Let's have that collaboration. Talk to your kids on that. Call them on down. Call them down there to have that, to be face-to-face on that. When we talk about with their cell phone, do they know the boundaries of their cell phone and what to use, what not to use on it? So many times now, we spend our time doing that at school. Do the kids understand and realize that what they put out there goes away, is out there forever? What do kids think today is the number one thing that they could say and it'll go away? Right? Everyone knows that app, right? Snapchat, right? I could say it, poof, it's gone. Somebody goes, oh, did you know about screenshots? Oh, I forgot about screenshots. Do you know it doesn't go away until after 24 hours? Oh, that 24 hours. Do you know that if the police want to, they could go back and retrieve that? Oh, shucks. But we have that collaboration together and have that. Let's take a look at empathetic. Man, every kid, what a big difference. And cell phones have been a big part of that, of getting kids to understand what empathy is. Years ago, when we ask our kids, do you know what empathy is? They say, yeah, it's when you feel bad for someone else. Okay. No, that's sympathy. Let's go to empathy, right? I feel confident in our middle school that out of 700 kids, I bet 650 of them on a bad day will be able to tell you, yeah, it's how putting yourself in someone else's shoes, seeing something from their vantage point. Well, we need kids to be empathetic and understand that what they say and they send to other people carries a message. Remember, 3 hours a day, that influence. Someone else is looking at that. Someone else is looking at an image that they have, they called someone else a name, or they commented about another person. They body shamed them. They face shamed them. They talked about, there's the sexting that goes on. Let's think about our neighbors right next door in Streetsboro, the horrific episode that they just went through, and that family still continues to. We could look at what's gone on recently in Strongsville and Medina and Brunswick. Because of all that, what things are said out there, their kids are not empathizing and realizing what I just did put others in a bad situation. And what that does is that collaboration we have together, be able to work together on that. Getting everyone to be able to understand where we're coming from. A lot of kids say, well, you know what, I did that because, I wanted to be their friend, or, my buddy did it. I didn't do it, my buddy did it. Yeah, but you liked it, laughed at it, and went with it. And we always emphasize and want to say, hey, you guys, if you're using them as a punchline in order to get your buddy to like you or to laugh, that's not what that cell phone's for. Let's understand what empathy is. That you made someone else feel that way. Put yourself in their shoes, because that cell phone carries all that power with them. Let's take a look at the word resilient. Mr. Roberto just talked a lot about that. I guarantee your kids see things on their cell phone that they shouldn't see. You have seen them. Someone else being mean to someone else. Someone mocking someone else. Maybe something sent to a kid that they're like, oh, I'm not going to show my mom and dad this one. Have you ever had a kid come up to you and show you something or tell you something? Mom, I didn't feel comfortable just now how so-and-so made fun of so-and-so. Hey, Mom, Dad, I don't feel comfortable right now because so-and-so just sent me this picture. Those kids are being resilient. That's hard to do, but you know what, in the end? That means you have collaborated and have had a great relationship with your kid to be able to have that comfort to be able to come back and say, hey, this is not good. They've got to be resilient. That power in their hand, they have to make sure that they are tough enough to handle it in the proper way. We have to make sure that they also understand you're not going to respond to somebody by badgering and continuing to go on with it. They say, oh man, people think this is funny. But again, are you using that? Are you thinking about empathy when you do that? When you're going, when you've gone this far with them, have you then also gone far enough to say with this? When I say when you've gone this far, you've bought them a cell phone, you put that in their hands. How many times you could purchase ads I'm sorry, purchase with more money to stop ads. You know your kid plays video games all the time. I like playing Word Crossy. Word Crossy keeps your mind going. It makes you think. I like that. I use Word Crossy a lot. It's my favorite one on my phone. If my kid wanted to use it all the time, would it benefit me to maybe pay a few extra bucks so those ads stop popping up? I think it could. That influence, because now I'm having more than influence on them than some advertisement. If you've gone that far, take it a step further on it. You know, you take a look at all the ads that pop up on phones about vaping. We could go on and on. That's a whole nother talk. Maybe if Dom asked me to come back again, we could talk about vaping in another one. And so the vaping that goes on. Well, vapes are no longer allowed to be just advertised and provided for kids, and you have to be older to get them. Guess who's the number one user of vapes? Guess who's the number one purchaser of vapes? Yeah, it's these kids. It's teenagers, young 20s. All right, kids that are right out there, very influenced, very malleable individuals. Why do we want to put that in that position? Let's maybe do what we can to get rid of those ads out there. We take a look at the fifth one, balance. Have you looked at the screen time usage yet? We talked about 3 hours per day. They say dozens and dozens of times an hour a kid's looking at a cell phone. Well, again, how do we have that balance in our day? We can control that cell phone plan. So many times parents are going, well, I don't know how to do this. You have the router at home. It may take some extra time, but it's worth it. What can that router eliminate or limit? Have that balance in that day. There's times when the cell phones, boom, get shut off. Some people will say to me, well, they need to have it as an alarm clock. Really? We can't have that balance enough to be able to say, you know what, charge it on the kitchen sink. I'll come and wake them up. My kids say it all the time. They'll probably be mad that I told you it. I'm the alarm clock. My wife a lot of times will say, oh, let me wake up. No, I want to. I work a lot of times 12, 14-hour days. I don't get to see my kids a lot of times throughout the day. Boy, that conversation I get to have with them when I wake them up. I love it. I have that balance in my day. They don't need to have that. They can have me. You know, why would they want to see me first thing in the morning? Believe me, they're like, Dad, we can't stand how you're a morning person. Hey, you know what? So be it. But I have that balance in there with them that it's not some phone going off and be like, let them have that. That's a few minutes of that time that a lot of kids don't have. I always say, people at Harmon, I mean, I try my best, and I hope as I get older I can continue to do it. My goal every year with 700 kids in the building is to know 700 kids' names. I like to be able to look at a kid and say, hey, Johnny, how you doing today? Hey, Sarah, how's it going? Because you know what? I think about my kids. I know I saw them this morning. But a lot of parents, man, they work their tails off. They're busy. And they can't see them all the time. Well, I want to make sure I'm that individual that at least can say hi to them. I can at least greet them. But you know what? We can do a better job on that. If it's your cell phone, or if it's that kid's cell phone waking them up, let's have that balance there. We can work better together on that. We need to make sure that when these individuals, when we balance our time, go home and take a look at the data. One time, the data usage. And you'll go, oh my God, they use this much. What app are they using the most? All right? Take a look at that, and you'll be able to see that. The last one up there is a critical thinker. All right? When we have a critical thinker, when we look at organization, logical thinking, kids of this age do not have that ability to necessarily think logically or stay organized. So you know what? What we can do? Show them that phone could be able to help them be a critical thinker. So many times, like in our schools, we don't ask kids to just sit there and say, memorize this, give me the answers. We want our teachers and our kids to go to that higher level. Think beyond. We tell our teachers, if our kids already know something, don't sit there and say, good, put your head down and I'll come back to you later. No, what can we do to take them to the next level? We need to be prepped for that. Why does that come in with a cell phone to be a critical thinker? There's so many things that they have access to on that cell phone that could take them to the next level to be a critical thinker. Have you had that conversation with your kids and said, hey, let me see what you have on yours to help you think on a better level, to help you navigate through things? They have things on there. Maybe you could, at this age, you're learning how to use money. Well, you have a bank account manager app on there. Does your kid's phone have that? Have them learn how to use their money on that. Help them learn how to study and stay organized. Kids at this age, their frontal cortex is not there right now. It's not developed. That cell phone, we can use that for that. It's a great tool for organization. Schools have gone away from the paper planners, write down, this is what I have for homework. Kids use their cell phones. What is your kid using? Right? Is it Google Keep? Is it a Google Calendar? Is it an app? Is it a picture? Talk to them about that. How are they critically thinking, saying, this is what I'm using to help myself be a better student? Last and not least, we did some things here at COVID. COVID was not just a bad thing. COVID brought us some good things, you guys. And so one of the things that I put out there at the beginning of COVID to our school, my parents and my kids, I always said we did the grade 8. And we still try to do the grade 8 every day in my family. I'm not saying we're the Cleavers and from Leave It to Beaver or the Brady Bunch or anything like that. But what we always try to do in our family is play some sort of game. We love playing rummy at home, solitaire. We make sure our kids do some sort of chores every day. It doesn't mean it's a half an hour of sloshing through the toilets and stuff. It could just be putting away their shoes, making their beds. We read or exercise, eating something healthy, help someone else, help their brothers, my kids help each other study. We always make sure we acknowledge someone else, acknowledge the other. What does that mean? You don't walk by somebody, hey, good morning, I love you, good night. And of course, we laugh or smile. And those grade 8 things, guess what? None of them take a cell phone. None of them take a cell phone to do that, but it's that communication. Again, do we need to be an alarm clock? Do we need to let them have their alarm clock? No. Let's be their alarm clock for them, you guys. And one last thing is I always say is that I always compare teenagers, what I always compare them to is what like bushes. In fact, I've told Mr. Roberto this recently, but I've always have said this. I've lived in my house now 23, it's going on 24 years. I have bushes that I planted 23 years ago. They're this big. Does anybody know what barberry bushes are? Or fire bush? They could get this big, whatever, fire bush, whatever as big as you want. Mine are this big. You're like, whoa, what do you do to stun their growth? I don't. I keep trimming them. And when we get into the beginning of a school year, we have a big talk with our kids and we start working with them. We communicate. And in the springtime, in a couple weeks, hopefully, I'll need to go out there and trim my bushes. And then as the year goes on, the summer goes on, and the school year goes on, we talk to our kids, we communicate with the kids. Because we don't have the cell phones during the day. We communicate. We work with them. And all throughout the summer, I'll be on my phone or I'll be outside just taking a little break, and I'm just walking around with my outdoor pruning shears, and I trim my bushes. And they're still this tall. They're healthy. Some fire bush I have that are this tall, some by my deck are this tall, because that's where I want them to be at. And so, and the same thing with kids. Instead of letting them get out of control, we stay and manage them. We stay and manage our own kids. Limit their time, know what they're doing, keep the communication, because their time is your time. Thank you guys for having me again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. Yeah, can we give it up one more time for Mr. Abramovich? Mr. A. Yeah, we are living in an online world, so it's helpful to hear some of those tangible takeaways and some of those tips. Hey, before we jump into our third and final presentation, which I'm really excited for, could everybody just stand up real quick? Let's do a little, a little stretch, 7th inning stretch, yeah? All right, nice. Got the blood flowing. All right, go ahead, have a seat again. And as you sit down, I want you to look for something. Look for a yellow ticket in your Parent Life packet. All right, if you have a yellow ticket, go ahead, just raise it up in the air. All right, hopefully 6 people have a yellow ticket, so keep looking if you don't have yours located yet, have gotten the grand prize of some free books. So we have 3 books that are being offered free of charge tonight. There's 3 books, but there's 2 copies of each. And you can find these books on the Next Steps table out in the atrium. So the 6 of you who have those yellow pieces of paper, you guys can go out there and haggle over which copies you want of these 3 books. But wait till after the event's over, okay? Let's keep it friendly. But, a part of tonight is we want to bless you with just some resources that can be really helpful. I also just want to kind of point your attention to the little slip in your packet that just has some resources that we put together, whether it's books or podcasts. We think some of these things can really help in the conversation of great parenting in a challenging world. Well, hey, with that being said, we're going to keep moving into our third and final presentation, which is going to be given by Pastor Todd Iannetta. He's going to be talking about what it means to trust God with your parenting. And just a little side note, Todd has been working with students for how many years? Was it like many years? He was my youth pastor. So he knows kids, he knows students, and I believe he's going to encourage you in a lot of ways as we talk about trusting God with your parenting. So welcome him up with me.
All right. Well, I feel like parenting brings out the very best in us, and it brings out the very worst in us. And I have to say, I'll never forget my first parenting fail, epic fail. And it all started when my daughter Reese was the oldest. She has almost one. And we went on vacation, and the very first day, proud dad, take my daughter down to the pool. All right? Sitting by the pool, and it's going to be awesome. Vacation just starting. I set her down. I turn around. I grab some sunscreen. I put a little bit on. What felt like just a few seconds, I turned around. My daughter's no longer there. Instead, she is standing right on the edge of the pool. Right? One, just learning to walk. I bolted towards the pool as fast as I could. Now, listen, this is a public pool. So I'm at a pool where all of a sudden every single person is watching me bolt towards my daughter. And everyone is thinking, what is this guy's problem? This careless, heartless dad who can't keep track of his little 1-year-old daughter. And I am, and they're judging me, much like you are, right now, judging me as a parent. So I am bolting towards my daughter as fast as I can, and I'm running, and I'm running, and I'm running. And the sign that says no running at the pool? That's a vital sign. You should listen to that sign, because as I am running as fast as I can, I started to slide as someone would slide into home plate. All right? Instead of home plate, though, in this case, it was my daughter, Reese. And I completely nailed her, pushed her into the pool as I slid into the pool and grabbed her. She went underwater. I lifted her up. She coughed up some water, and she was fine physically. Emotionally, she's 13 now, and Mr. A's got to deal with her at Harmon Middle School. That was my first epic parenting fail. And there were two things that I did terribly wrong that day. First one is I didn't protect my little girl. Now, I wasn't watching her like I should have been as a parent. But the second thing is that when things got out of control, I decided to try to take more control. And instead of making it better, it only made it worse before it eventually did get better. And that story, as I think back on it, is actually a really good visual for what I believe parenting can be like at any age. And here's why. Because I feel like for parents, what happens is we either give too much freedom, and in doing so, allow some dangerous things to be exposed to our kids, or we take too much control and try to control every part of the situation. And oftentimes that makes things worse before it gets better. And so what I have kind of learned in my limited parenting experience, but even watching other parents, is that there's kind of two extremes to parenting. There is the too much freedom, giving kids too much freedom, or there's too much control. Too much freedom, too much control. And the problem, there's a problem with both of those extremes. The problem with too much freedom, of course, is that your child is not capable of always making the right decisions. Right? A 1-year-old can't be trusted by a pool. A 3-year-old can't be trusted by a busy street. An 11-year-old can't be given a cell phone or having unlimited access and unfiltered access to the internet. because they are not always capable of being able to make the right decisions. The problem, oh, by the way, I think that's why God created parenting. If all kids needed was freedom, I don't think God would have ever designed this whole idea of parenting. We wouldn't need supervision for our kids. But the problem with too much control is that if all you do is try to control every part of their environment so that you can make sure they try to turn out a certain way, you're never teaching them, as has been said already, how to make decisions on their own. So too much freedom and too much control. Now let me say this, I don't think any of us has that perfect balance down. And I do believe that, early on, there's a whole lot of control. And then as you go, you move closer and closer to freedom. But nobody has that balance down. But what I want to do with the time today is I want to talk about, in response to those extremes, I believe God is calling us as parents to two words that kind of sum up what it looks like to be the parent that God wants you to be. And here are the two words that I want to focus on. The first one is provide and then prepare. Provide and prepare. And so first is provide. This has been said, and Mr. A hit this, but here's what I believe. Trusting God with your parenting means that you trust that God has given you, the parent, the number one influence on your child's life. And I truly believe, I believe that's true. I believe parents are still the primary influence on their kids' life. I believe you believe that because you're here tonight as well. But I also think that's for better or worse, right? If there is an absence of a parent, that leaves a gaping hole in a child for a long time. And if you do well parenting, your kids sometimes will thank you for a long, long time because there's generational impact. And so we see that. Now, people will say, well, social media is really influential and their friends are really influential. And I believe that. But God has designed this that the most lasting influence on a child is the parent. It's you. And I want to take a look at Deuteronomy 6, verses 5 to 9. This is known as the Hebrew Shema. And essentially, as a parent, the way you look at this is what, in a nutshell, God's calling parents to do. And here's what it says. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. All right? I love this passage because to sum up this passage, your job as a parent is to provide influence and instruction as often as you possibly can for your kids so that they might grow in their love for God. That is what the Hebrew Shema is saying. That's what God wants for you. Now, it starts, notice, with a positive command. That's what I love about the Hebrew Shema is it doesn't say, here's all the bad things you're going to want to keep your kids away from. What it says is, no, listen, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and teach your kids to do the same. And what I believe we need to do as parents is start with a vision for what we want our kids to be like. Start with the end in mind. You have an idea of what you believe God is calling your kids to be like, and you need to start there. So Mike and Mark just started talking about the Aurora strategic vision with the 6 values. And I love that because what the schools did is they said, hey, we're going to start with what we want our kids to look like after they've gone through the whole entire Aurora school system and graduation. But I believe that parents can have a strategic vision too. That we can take a look at our kids and decide what we feel like God is calling them to be, have a vision for it, and then begin to decide what values are we going to find important. And then once you decide what those are, you do as much as you can to influence them and to instruct them. I like the grade 8, that having something all the time that you are just pouring into them constantly. So my wife and I did this, and I encourage you to do this, is come up with your own set of values that you might have, especially, and at any age. It doesn't matter what age your kids are. If they're young, start now. If they're already a little bit older, it's never too late. But what we did is we created a value system, and I won't share all of the values with you, but one of them is that we say, Ionetta's finish what they start. That's our thing. In other words, resilience. Right? Resilience is the same thing. What we want our kids to do is that we want them to be the kind of kids that when they start something, they're committed and they see it through to the end. So whether that's their sports season that they commit to and they don't want to go to practice, we say, Ionetta's finish what they start, or their homework, or whatever it is. Right? But start with the end in mind. But here's what I just want to say before I move to the next one. I think if we don't start taking more control as in understanding that we are the influence on our kids, then there are so many other things that will win the day. But trust me, for better or worse, there will be a lasting impact if we don't instruct and influence our kids. All right? So that moves me to number 2, which is not just to provide, but to prepare. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but do you know that there's 216 months from age 0 to 18? That doesn't sound right, does it? Like some of you are trying to do the math in your head right now because you're like, that's not enough. But I did the math. I did it a couple times on my calculator, right? 216 months from age 0 to 18. It's really not that long. And it's amazing how sometimes it goes really, really slow, but sometimes it goes really, really fast. And what this is speaking to is that our kids are going to spend the majority of their lives outside of our house. And so it is our job to prepare them the best we can. If you could sum up the Hebrew Shema from Deuteronomy 6, it would simply be this: love God, teach your kids to do the same. Love God, teach your kids to do the same. But I think as a parent, and we live in a very churched area, so whether you're at Silver Creek or go to another church, a lot of times we look at our kids and we go, oh, yeah, I want to make sure that they learn about God. I want to make sure they're taught about God. But if we start by trying to teach them about God, but we miss the first commandment, we will miss everything and not prepare them like we could. What I want to tell you today is this: that your number one job as a parent is not to teach your kids about God. Your number one job is to love God. That's your job. And in doing so, you will provide the best environment for your kids to do the same. One thing I know these guys know, but kids, especially when they get to like middle school, they can spot an imposter from a mile away. They can sniff it out. And what I want you to know is the best parenting is always caught more than it's taught. I remember for my parents, I was blessed to have parents that did great. They weren't perfect, but they were great. I think they're watching online too, so hi, Mom, Dad. But my parents were great. They taught me a lot of things. I don't remember much of what they taught me. I remember what they did. And I remember the consistency in their life. I remember things like my dad, when I would come down in the morning and he'd have his Bible open on the table because his faith wasn't just something he wanted for me, it was real for him. I remember, my parents serving in the church and investing in people. And I remember all kinds of that. I remember them being the same people everywhere they went. And those things, I wasn't thinking about that very much when I was like 11 years old. I wasn't thinking about how that was happening, but it has had a huge impact on me because I believe parenting is definitely more caught than taught. But here's the problem. What happens when we mess up as parents, because we all do. Right? Every single one of us has messed up. And the good news is that loving God, that's what you strive for, doesn't mean that you get it all right. But what it does mean is that you're willing to admit when you don't. You're willing to admit when you fail. And I really believe that as parents, that you may do more to prepare your son or daughter for life outside the home, not by displaying your success, but by admitting your failure. And I think this is so good, because if you never admit your failure, your kids are never going to think that that's okay to do. They're never going to think that their failure can ever be made right. And so the most godly king in the Bible was David. He was the most successful king out of all the kings in the Bible. But I think one of David's finest moments was after he epically failed. And we don't have to get into all of what he did. If you're familiar with the Bible, you probably know. But this is what David said in Psalm 51, 16 and 17. For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it. You will not be pleased with a burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. In this moment, David's life was not defined by success, but how he actually responded when he failed. I love this, because what this says is you cannot go wrong with humility. A broken and contrite heart, oh God, God will not despise. Right? And that is something we have to remember as we think through parenting, because the only thing that's true of all of us as parents is that we've failed. We've lost our temper. We've messed up. I love, we don't get to noon on New Year's before the Father of the Year goes out the window. That is true of every single one of us. We don't measure up. And it's true of our kids as well. We are incapable of getting it right every single time. And I think the more we're willing to admit that, the more power that God will display in our lives. It's why we need Him so badly. And so here's what I want you to know. The only one who has the power to right the wrongs, the only one who has the power to forgive so that you can continue to be the parent God calls you to be, is God Himself. And that is what He's done. That's why He sent Jesus down to this earth to give His life in our place so that we could be forgiven. And as parents, we don't operate under the law where we have to be the best parents possible so that somehow our kids look at us and idolize us. We just have to be parents that have power that is coming from the grace that is in Jesus. And I believe that is going to go a long way. So listen, when you admit your failure to your kids and to God, you are showing them something very powerful. You're showing them that the one thing that they need in this life more than anything else is a relationship with God that can only come through Jesus. And you could walk in that grace every day. And by doing so, you will prepare your kids more than any other thing that you can do, any other book that you can read. That's how you prepare your kids. So, there's only one perfect parent, and that's our Heavenly Father. And sometimes I am convinced that God created parenting so that every single one of us at some point would get down on our knees and ask for mercy from God. God help me. And when we do, I have to tell you this, if that's where you're at right now, I believe God does some of His best work when we completely submit ourselves and surrender to His plan in His way. So let's be parents that provide and prepare our kids. And I'm just getting the conversation started. There's so much I could say. But above all, would we be parents that are deeply dependent on a relationship with God through Jesus? Because that's the thing that lasts forever. Let me pray for us, then I know we're going to move into a Q&A. Father, thank you so much for who you are, for being our God, and for being the God who is ready and willing to forgive, to be there when we know we are not doing enough, when we know we've messed up. Thank you for giving us Jesus so that we could be forgiven. I pray that parents here today would find great comfort in a relationship with you and with other parents, knowing that none of us has this down, and we're all working towards doing whatever we can for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks, Todd. Can we give it up for Pastor Todd Iannetta? Awesome. Well, hey, we have a few minutes left, and with your permission, we might go just a few minutes over, but we want to be respectful of time. We're going to invite our three speakers on up now. If you guys want to come on up and take a seat. As they do, let me just remind you, there's a few ways that you guys can submit questions. We have either a good old-fashioned blank index card that you can write some questions on. You can raise it up, and leaders will actually be walking around and able to grab those cards and bring them on up to me. Or you can get a little techie with us and text the word Silver Creek to that number. You'll get a welcome message, but once you get that message, it opens up the line, and so you can kind of text in whatever questions you might have. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started, actually, with a few questions I have for you guys. We've got a mic here to kind of share, and I think Todd's got his over the ear. So I wanted to kind of open up our Q&A time with a question about friends. So we didn't really touch on friendship in particular as a topic, but if it's one thing that we know for all of our kids is they have friends, and those friends have an impact on them. So here's a question for you guys. How do you encourage parents to lead their kid when their kid is hanging out with friends that are negatively impacting them? What kind of conversation can that look like?
So one of the ways that I would start with that is that we encourage kids to look at themselves, kind of going back on the empathy part, because they always want to say, I feel bad, I don't want to tell on him, or I don't want to not be around him because then he won't have a friend or she won't have a friend. But we look back and just asking them to tell themselves, are they doing what you want they should be doing? Are they doing the right thing? And then there's always the part that we want to, I always say we got to stop the dominoes from falling. So, because if the friend does it, the next kid does it, then the next kid does it. If we get them to stop falling, then we'll go back to the crux of the problem. So if it's that one individual that might be doing that to get them better. Just because a kid's maybe not doing the right thing now doesn't brand them for life. It's a kid, he makes mistakes. It's our job as parents and as educators to help them. So what a better place it would be is if we get them to start doing the right thing and they get them to realize there's a lot of people around them doing the right thing. So we want to encourage the kids to realize and understand that just because one's doing it, you don't have to do it. But at the same time, while we're doing that, we're also going to the crux of it, trying to help that individual out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I'll just be quick. I mean, Mark talks about doing the right thing, and I think that, we talk about our strategic vision, and at home, you talk about, you can do the same thing in terms of your values as a family, and I think that reminding your kids of what it is that you value and what's important for you and your family, I think is important. And then I think the other piece is that, I don't know if my kids ever picked it up, but there are some friends that I was around a lot more often than some of their other friends, because, it's just important to be around and work through things sometimes and set them up for success.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to say, as parents too, I think we can't be afraid to say, you know what, that friend is not the right friend, and it's okay to say we're not gonna hang out there. But I also like the idea of, making sure that there are certain friends that you would just hang out with a little bit more. I'm gonna hang around. There's certain places you're not gonna go, or the way we've done it before is like, they can come to our house, but I'm not sure we're ready to send them to your house, so.
Yeah, thank you guys. Friendship seems to be king today, more than ever. And like you guys have each shared, as parents, one of our jobs is to lead and direct in a very active way. And sometimes that means talking about some of the friendships that kids have.
Real quick, sorry, I just got an
Yeah.
anecdote. When I was growing up, I had these friends that I would hang out with like every Friday, and I don't know why, but one time my parents were just like, you can't hang out with them anymore. And I was like, what? And I was devastated. And I was yelling, I was mad, couldn't believe it. Like 2 weeks later, and I went to, CVCA, but 2 weeks later, they got in trouble with the law and got kicked out of school. I'm like, parents, you guys have wisdom. You know stuff. Your kids don't know a lot. And I'm telling you, use that spidey sense as much as you can, because I was so mad now, but you better believe how happy that I am that they made that decision. So your kids are going to just despise things that you do, but don't let that be the reason why you don't do it.
I would say my kids think I'm a lot smarter now than they did when they were 11 and 12 and then teenagers. So somehow I got smarter.
That's good to know.
Well, hey, a few questions are coming through our text line, but I just encourage you, even if you've written on an index card, let us know. We've got people around the room who will grab those. But I wanted to ask a very specific question just to some of the guys who are on our panel who work with our schools very closely. It's a privilege having you guys here tonight. So I want to ask, what do you wish more parents knew about the impact of school in the life of their kid? And are there any untapped resources at school that parents just tend to miss, that are just kind of there for them and they just don't even know about it?
Well, I think in terms of resources, just talking and with the teachers and talking with your children every day, like Mark alluded to, about what's going on in schools. We can put out a state report card, and we can put out how we're doing here or there, but it's those everyday conversations that I think are really important. And because it's like you can't see the forest for all the trees, it's the things that's happening every day that I think is really important. And if you ever want to dive into our strategic vision, there's all kinds of things that are there that I don't think people realize on the website that will help, I think, make some of those connections and maybe start some conversations with your kids too.
That's great.
I would say within the schools, the resources, we were able to hire in the last couple of years a wellness counselor. And what a wellness counselor has done is been able to provide additional support for individuals. Not a guidance counselor, but a wellness counselor where they're a clinical counselor within the schools. And we do not want to, it's not just a COVID thing or anything like that, but we talked about, or I mentioned with the cell phone, that things could be affecting kids physically, socially, emotionally, and it's not just from a cell phone. So we want to always make sure that there's resources and there are things that are out there for the kids. Have a lot of parents that'll say, what else can we do? Nobody has all the answers, but there's a lot of things that are out there. I think it's also important to know that, like I say to the kids all the time, that, again, empathy. If your parents do not allow you to do that at home, if you're not allowed to do that anywhere else, we have the same values and morals at school. We just take it to the academic level on it. There are some teachers at schools that are loud, some that are quiet, some that are, but every single one of them gets up in the morning and say, how can we help kids? Nobody gets up and says, oh, I'm gonna get that 13-year-old today. We all want to get up to do the best that we can to help kids out. And I know I've been around our staff for a long time, and I could say that very confidently that, we're all, and when I have seen a lot of issues that have occurred, when the parents, teachers, counselors, and admin, we're all working together, good things happen. And that's what we have to continue to do, is work together to help our kids.
Yeah, that collaboration. Love it. Well, hey, a question just came in, and I think it has to do a lot with what all three of you talked about, especially with technology and resilience, and even, Pastor Todd, what you talked about of providing and preparing. But, worst case scenario, kids can be pretty brutal to one another at times, and that can be pretty catastrophic. So how do you guide a child through being bullied?
Babe, you want to come up? My wife's a counselor, so that's hard. I think, first of all, it's really important. I wonder how much of it is not being seen because it's through texting. And so the thing that I was thinking was like, be more aware of what's going on. And one thing we do is, and Jillian's better than I am at this, but reading through text message strings and stuff like that, I think, again, Mr. A said this, but the phone is not your child's, it's yours. And so I think it's completely fine to be able to be aware of it. But then talking through the bullying thing is, boy, I wonder if the empathy part is really important at that point too, because whenever bullying is happening, you know that there's an insecurity going on, in somebody's life that is leading them to that point. But you've got to make sure they're distanced. You get distance from that person, and I think you have to probably talk about grace and forgiveness too. But but there's got to be boundaries, and you've got to help your kid draw those boundaries. I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
I think it's very important as well to, as we said before, to be able to know what they're doing by being the influence on it. If a kid is coming to you about that something that is happening, that is a very positive step, that you have a relationship with your child, that they want to talk to you about something that was said. Or if somebody comes to us at school that something is happening either to themselves or to a friend, that's a positive step, and we acknowledge that okay, now let's fix it. We fix it in a way, whether it's with kid on kid, whether it's with bringing the parents on board with it. There are many different ways to approach that, but understand that a lot of times, as Todd said, it's said to them online because maybe even adults talk tougher behind a phone or a computer screen versus the reality of face-to-face. So many times they don't even mean what they're saying on it, but they feel that they could get away with that, where we want to provide or present the reality to kids, that's not what the reality is. It's something that you see online. The reality is us being face-to-face right now with each other on it.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask a follow-up question to this bullying question, because I think you guys made the connection where a lot of bullying is happening online, whether it's through texting or social media. And so kind of a follow-up to it is, when is the right time to take a phone away? Whether it's for the protection of a kid or even as a disciplinary measure of saying, hey, maybe this is having too much influence over your life. What do you guys suggest as far as reading that situation for when it's time as a parent to take that away?
That's a tough question. I think really though, what Todd alluded to, if you feel like it's time, it's time. Trust yourself. We talk about God's grace and the idea that if you happen to have taken it away when you weren't supposed to, well, you know what? It's God's plan, not your child, in that sense. And so be it. So if you feel like that's the case, that you need to do that, then you really do need to. The other piece, and kind of tied to the original question too, is I think it's important for kids to understand that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And if you want to help your kid work through some of that stuff, sometimes they want to hang on to a friendship, or sometimes they want to hang on and be in a popular crowd or something like that. Sometimes they just need to be indifferent and step away because it's not a good place for them to be. So I think sometimes kids relate anger as to being something that's the opposite, and really the opposite is indifference.
I would look for the addiction part as well. And what I mean by the addiction part is we've had kids that maybe have to go to a bathroom and stuff, and they'll have the phone like this, and like we don't know it's there. They can't be without it. Kids that'll have the phone in their book bag and they're going down trying to go on it. Or at home, where normally if my boys will, We don't exactly have the most pristine-looking house. Our foyer is a basketball hoop in there, and the kids they're always playing. And I'd much rather have our boys making a racket in there and making a mess or doing whatever. But if one is like, nah, I don't want to do that, and he's just instead on his phone. Or they normally are, when dinner's done, they run to the phone because it's definitely not going to be at our dinner table. So any time that it's like just pulling them towards it, it's like, all right, time to stop that. I don't like to be the cell phone police officer at school, but I've had this year a few times the kids walk in the building, put it in the office. Parents know that if you need to get a hold of them, like any time, call us at school. We'll get the message to them. But when a kid's sneaking around trying to do that and to be on the phone, you're not allowing us to be an educate them because I know we could give them a top-notch education. But when the phone is pulling them away at home, same thing. When they're looking to do everything else and not do anything else except to be on the phone, I like to say that we're going to call a timeout on that one there, and that needs to come away a little bit.
It's a beautiful punishment for us. I mean, that's like our oldest has a phone right now, and it's just it is a great tool for saying, hey, you keep that up, you lose your phone. So it may not even be that they're using the phone wrong, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
This is going to be, unfortunately, the last question that we can get to, just looking at time. But this is a little bit more specific towards Mr. Roberto, your presentation. But regarding the mindset topic, do you have any suggestions for parents to help shift a child's mindset that seems to be fixed versus the growth? Any tangible suggestions for that?
Well, I gave you a disclaimer. I have no good advice, so I'll remind you. But I can talk about some things that, we try to, we talk about this in the classroom as well, as paying attention to see if someone has a fixed mindset, maybe a little bit more than a growth. And of course, it's not one or the other, as I mentioned. But even some of the things that you say, for example, you are so smart. You know what I mean? Smart is a wording, is vocabulary for a fixed mindset. And we think we're doing something good about that because it's like, oh, I'm smart because this comes to me fast. I'm fast at math, something like that. Where we're really trying to nurture that idea of, you really struggled through that problem. You showed some, resilience in that sense, and you were able to eventually get to that, or you're closer to understanding what's going on. So I guess the biggest thing that I can say is, with that example, is the vocabulary that we use with our kids. It almost goes back to that Pygmalion effect piece that I mentioned as well.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here tonight. We didn't have a chance to get to all the questions, so I apologize if we didn't get to ask yours. But I did want to just mention before we dismiss for the night, I just want to mention some ideas for a next step for you. Because I think a lot of times events like these are really helpful, they're really informative, but we also want to give you tangible takeaways that hopefully can encourage you and to help you parent in a great way in a challenging world. And so I just want to remind you a few next steps are, first and foremost, hold on to these packets and look at maybe some of the notes you took, but also the resource page that we put in there. There's some really fantastic books, podcasts, things that are really geared towards helping you parent well. The next thing I would just encourage you to consider tonight is who are you connected with? Because I think a lot of what we discussed tonight is something that we need to link arms with. And I think, parenting gets even harder if you feel like you're on an island with it. And we all have our own experiences with what's going on in the life of our kid. And one of the most helpful things you can do is maybe just get connected to another parent here tonight in a meaningful way. Maybe you already are. But I'd also encourage you, get connected to communities, right? Here at Silver Creek, we're really big about community because we believe that you are formed in community. So ask yourself that question. Am I in a community of parents that I feel like I can kind of run through some of these things with? And also, I just want to make a shameless plug. Maybe one of your next steps is actually getting your kid connected with Student Life because they also need community in a really positive, informative way. And I get to lead Student Life. That's what we call our middle school and high school ministry here. And so if you want more information about that, we've got kind of a kiosk out in the atrium. The last next step I'd just invite you to consider is maybe come forward after we're done dismissing, and our panel of speakers are gracious enough to kind of hang out up front. If you have a question that you would like to ask them or just want to follow up on something shared, we'd love for you to come forward and have that conversation tonight. But thank you again for being here. We hope that you were encouraged and equipped. We hope to do more of these events in the future, so keep an eye out for it. And remember, if you got a golden ticket, you're not going to Willy Wonka's, but you can go get a book off of our resource table out in the atrium. And if you've got that green ticket, come find me, because we are going to give you some Cleveland Guardians tickets. All right, have a great night. Thanks for being here at Paralife.
May we thirst, may we crave who you are and who you're wanting us to be, who you want us to be.